Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So something I've been meaning to test and give more data on is the mount to equip powers Ferocity versus Providence. I get asked many times, which is better? Which should I be using? I've always claimed Ferocity is better, but never really had the data to back up exactly why. So in this video, let's cover and analyze which one is actually better, which one of them should you actually be using, and ultimately why they are best in slot for damage dealers to use, at least at the endgame level. So first of all, let's point out some differences. Ferocity is triggered on a chance when you or a party member is struck by a foe, and then you will gain a stack of 1.6% additional damage for 10 seconds, this being able to stack up to 3 times. Providence then also has a chance when you or a party member is struck by a foe that the person who triggered it will be healed, and then you gain a stack of Radiant Weapon. And it says here, Radiant Weapon is 2% additional damage as radiant damage for 12 seconds. You may have no more than 8 stacks of Radiant Weapon. Therefore, just looking at their tooltips and how they're said to work, you would think Providence would work better, right? Because it could stack up to like 8 times, giving you 16% additional damage, and it lasts 12 seconds, versus Ferocity lasts only 10 seconds and can only stack up 3 times. That's what you might be led to believe, and unfortunately it doesn't really work like that. So before we dive into the details, let's go over why you should be using these as a damage dealer at the endgame level. Well, it simply boils down to this. When you can get all of your stats maxed out, then you need to find ways to improve your damage, and these mount equip powers are a method. Instead of using stats, which when you're maxed out, you don't need any more of, and so you would then switch to like Ferocity can give you up to 4.8% additional damage with 3 stacks, and Providence potentially up to 16%. There are no alternatives that you could use to improve your damage with regards to these mount equip powers. You might get some measly bonus that'll allow you to gain a eensy-weensy bit of action point gain, like this one here, quick action, but it is an absolute tiny amount that it is generally not worth using. And so you would use a power like Ferocity or Providence again to gain that damage boost. However, you need to be aware that this damage is not going to actually contribute to your overall damage. It's not going to affect all of your powers and features, etc., like your base damage boost would, because it is an additional hit. It works exactly like these overloads, which they say in the tooltip, your damaging at-will encounter and daily powers deal an additional 10% damage. This is exactly how these bonuses, Ferocity and Providence, are working too. That means if we have abilities like Bleed from our Duelist Flurry, like Oppressive Darkness, like Life Lessons, our belt item, our mount combat power, none of those will gain the extra damage from this ability. Only your initial hit on your at-will, encounter and daily powers, which means it's not going to be a true extra damage boost like you would find in other areas, like say the Neverwinter Night. That will affect your belt item, your mount power, your life lessons, all of those other things which are not just at wills, encounters and dailies. It will affect my bleed, and so the extra damage is sorely diminished. We can see some examples here. Oppressive Darkness not gonna proc our Ferocity, but our Duelist will. Providence will not trigger on say our Golden Touch, which was our mount combat power there, but it will trigger on every single hit of say a Crescendo daily power. If we look for example on Wizard and add up all of the damage that is contributed just from at-wills, encounters and daily powers, we find that 70% of our damage is from that. The remaining 30% is from other abilities. Therefore, powers like Providence and Ferocity will only be 70% effective on that class. For some classes, it can be a lot worse, like maybe only 50% of your damage comes from your at-wills encounters and dailies, and the rest would come from like feats and features. But now let's jump to my test results of which is better. So first of all, we look at Ferocity, and we'll find its chance to trigger is about 10%. Keep in mind again, it is not just you who can get hit, your allies like the tank can get hit and trigger this bonus. You will see it as a buff icon just up here. And one thing to note already is the duration is actually 12 seconds, not 10 as it claims on the tooltip. On top of that, this can refresh. So every time you obtain a new stack, it's going to refresh the duration of all previous stacks up to 12 seconds, which means it's fairly easy to maintain, especially when in a group or a trial and everybody's taking lots of damage. So the max potential of this ability would again be 4.8% with 3 stacks. And keep in mind of the 10% chance to trigger. So 1 in every 10 hits you and your allies take will cause this effect to go on you on average. But then we compare it with Providence. Again, when you or your allies are getting hit, you have that chance for it to trigger. However, you will notice the chance is actually a lot less. You can see it right there. You gain Radiant Weapon, and it lasts for 12 seconds as correctly displayed on the tooltip. However, this effect may only occur once every 10 seconds. Combining that with the chance to trigger of only like 3.5%, you end up with this thing never being able to stack, and so the max damage you usually get is 2% from 1 stack of this Radiant Weapon. Now, we do know that, yes, Radiant Weapon stacks can go up to 8, and you can very easily see that when you use like the Stalwart Golden Lion and like the Aureal Armament. The lion just has to roar, you get 2 of them. We can use this mount power, and when this shield expires, you can see we gain 3 of those Radiant Weapon stacks, and when the lion roars again, we go up to 5. And they do very nicely refresh, just again, with only Providence, you cannot really reliably get more than 1 stack because of that annoying may only occur once every 10 seconds. So it has potential, but it's just nowhere near as effective compared to Ferocity, because again, the trigger chance for Ferocity is far greater. There's no limit, there's no cooldown of when it can trigger compared to Providence. Yeah, like 3 times less trigger chance and that 10-second cooldown. So ultimately, there's no real question which is better to go for. Just use Ferocity. However, that doesn't mean you can't use other sources to give you Radiant Weapon damage. It can be very viable, and people already do run the Stalwart Golden Lion companion as a support for that roar, for that Radiant Weapon damage. That is something I want to test out more specifically, and on top of that, running multiple of them so you can actually get up to, say, 8 stacks of Radiant Weapon. But that will have to be for another video. Hopefully all of this was somewhat insightful. Again, this does show Ferocity is just a lot better than Providence. My suggestions for the devs would be ultimately to remove that 10-second cooldown condition where it won't be able to trigger within that, and potentially improve the trigger chance to like 5%. But do keep in mind, Providence has a bit more of a survivability edge to it by having the 6% of your maximum hit point heal, which does work very nicely. Just doesn't happen very often because of that absolutely tiny trigger chance of 3.5%. So once again, thanks for watching. A special thank you to all of these channel members for your extra support, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.